1964, Dean Romero, screenwriter, Angel's Flight, Indus Arthur. Last film noir film shot on Bunker Hill. Really great film. Indus Arthur's the serial killer. Yeah, it's a really great film. Great bar. Okay, hi, I'm Richard. I want to welcome everyone to our 35th Lava Salon. We have a great lineup today. There's Cece. Hi, Cece. Okay, two talks today. Suzanne, Dale, and Cece are going to do readings and talk on the nature of poem noir, hence a film noir film in the background, which I will turn off in a moment. Nathan Marsack, or there you are. Nathan, you're going to give the second talk on architecture of death. Public mausolea, sepulchers? No, just public mausolea.
Mausolea, we'll throw in a couple columbaria there.
Okay, good. All right, very excited. People should get flyers if you don't have some. We have some, lots of fun. We do lots of neat stuff. Usually we do walking tours after the salons. We'll do that again starting next month. The walking tours are on Broadway. They're all about Broadway. Broadway is being temporarily reconstructed according to the Broadway Master Streetscape Plan. Phase 1, Strategy 1, a $1 million temporary overhaul. And I think it's really deeply problematic on a number of levels. And if you come on the tour, we'll walk on Broadway, we'll talk about really neat things about Broadway and talk about why people should be very concerned about these temporary additions, and hopefully, maybe if they ever become permanent, they can take some of the things away and make it better. Okay, Suzanne, why don't you come on up here and get us started? Okay. I'm just going to, do we need a film projecting in the background, or should I turn this off?
Well, I don't mind having some images, even though it's going to be hard for me to compete with all those film noir women who are more beautiful than
All right, we're just going to turn it off. We're just going to power down.
All right. Hey, who here has ever been to a poetry reading? Oh, many people. Many? Whoa! You're a literate audience. But I bet very few people have ever been to a poetry reading of poems noir, because there are very few in the country. In fact, I think you're the only one. The country's 3,000 plus miles long, and you are in the only film noir poetry reading right now. And we are celebrating coming to the end of National Poetry Month. So, who here, and by the way, since we can all be heard somewhat, does anybody here want to give me a short capsulized definition of film noir? Oh, so how about this gentleman? How about this gentleman right here? Somebody came up to you and said, "What's film noir?" You might say, "I don't know, I'm talking to the wrong person here."
Basically, what movies that involve dark subjects, being that noir in French is black. So dark subject matter?
And yeah, a little more than that. It's a particular style of movie. A style of movie that we associate with, I'd say the great classic era of film noir was 44 to 57. Started with maybe Double Indemnity and amen. Barbara. Yeah, amen. Double, let's hear it for Double Indemnity. Barbara Stanwyck, Fred Mercury, Eddie G. Robertson, Water. Yay, okay. And ended, in many of the scholars' opinion anyway, with Touch of Evil, Orson Welles. Oh, Marlene Dietrich was in that, and Charlton Heston playing a Mexican detective. And in that era, there were these low-budget black and white crime movies. And they had to be very innovative in how they were filmed because they didn't have big budgets. Often, near the end, they started to gather big stars. And in the early days, they had people who were going to be stars. People like Burt Lancaster started in those movies, and Robert Altman really cut his teeth, learned how to make movies by making the cheap film noirs. But the style was very crisp It was cynical, but it was also witty. And if anybody happens to remember anything about French existentialism, it's actually sort of the American version of French existentialism, which is a little harder, a little wittier, a little streetier, and of course less what?
Boring.
And yeah, really, because I had not made my way through, sorry, believe me, and less intellectual.
So I think I'm gonna step over here.
So I became interested in taking some elements of the film noir style and incorporating them into poetry. And the reason that was interesting to me is because I lived for quite a time in a very film noir urban environment. I lived in a 4-story brick apartment building on the unfashionable side of Vermont Avenue, which means below Sunset, below the nice chic Los Feliz area. That building is still standing there, all closed down, Lexington and Vermont. And there is no plaque on it that says Suzanne Lummis lived and wrote here, which I think Richard can do something about that. Because I mean, really, you know? And also I did experience some street violence. So because I experienced some street violence, I wanted to write about violence as a topic for my poetry, not the only topic, but one interesting topic, without being at the least bit melodramatic, sentimental, or self-righteous, and without talking directly about justice or any of those issues and getting preachy, programmatic, doing anything predictable. It was the film noir style that gave me the voice that helped me develop this particular type of poetry. And as for how many people are doing it across the country, Cece, how many people do you think are really writing? They're the ones who think they're writing poems noir. The ones who think they are, the ones who are deluded. How many real ones are there? I don't know. Are there a good dozen? Do you think there are a dozen?
That's generous. I'd say 10.
You'd say 10? Maybe 10. And some, maybe another 10 we don't know about, right? And then a lot of people writing sort of a faux film noir poem. This one is really more inspired by those pulp novels. Oh, they looked a little bit like this. Remember that, the pulp novel? You started out, at one time you could get it. If you're really old, you can remember when they were 35 cents. Of course, I'm not that old. I'm lying, I am. But anyway, all right, so this was from a blurb, cover blurb from an old pulp novel, which is the cousin of film noir, the old detective stories and so on. It's a terrible piece of writing I'm going to read to you. It's not even a good blurb from a pulp novel. The women who enter there find nothing but desperation and lust to drink. This is hissing. Gin Alley. Gin Alley. It's 1939, a Monday, and a depression. So me, I fasten one tall heel, the color of heart's blood on each foot, and go to Gin Alley. I'm not that thirsty tonight. Desperation and lust will do fine. Inside, another tall heel catches my eye. His silk shirt looks like it's been hand-washed by some dye-job blonde. It's got 3 open buttons, 3 closed, and the last tucked away in the realm of the imagination. Something about him makes me slip a thin cigarette in my mouth and start tapping my bullet-shaped nails. When he catches my drift, he walks his arms and legs over my way and says something witty like, "Hi." I take a smooth sip from a lousy beer. I say, "Not yet, but I'm getting there." He says, "You look lonely." "Well, I can fix that." I say, "I'm short a buck for a fifth. Can you fix that too?" He says, "Oh, hard luck case, huh?" I give him the kind of look that makes a man feel needed. Yeah, so let's hope you're good for a half night of hard luck. Then, in the middle of page 24, 3 big things happen at the same time. 1, the barman smacks down a glass of bad tap water and bad gin. 2, the dreamboat locks onto me like heavy machinery. And 3, you, the page turner, decide I'm a tramp. Yeah? Listen, Joe, the only one around here worse off than me is you, the loser who's reading this book. At least I get to jump this hayride on page 236, but you'll sail right past it and keep on going, probably to the corner diner where you'll perch, round-shouldered, Mr. Small Change and big dreams with a fry stain on your lapel. It's the real world you're in, kid, where no one's quite good enough to wisecrack their way through. Yes, that one. Very often, the poem noir, it has this little bit of dark comedy to it, this wisecracking wit, but under it, the way I conceive of it anyway, according to the Lummisian definition, there's an undercurrent of something serious about the human condition, something revealing of this pathos of the human condition. Now I have one. Cece, I know you hate this poem. It's not that you hate it, but you just don't want to hear it. This is a poem noir stripped of the comic elements. I usually don't read it because it is so dark. It will just plunge you into a dark place that you will be screaming, "Get me out of here!" And but it's too late to leave because we barred the doors. But I'll follow up with something slightly lighter, I think. And it is really, it's the undercurrent. It's my knowledge. I guess it's my first-hand knowledge of noir. It gives me my noir cred. It's set in the building that I was living in for quite some time. And one night, the helicopter started circling and circling, and those helicopters do that from time to time. But this time, it kept circling and kept circling my building. And it was, just as I describe it in this poem, where the light, that searchlight from the helicopter, would come straight through my window. It was incredibly cinematic. I mean, you couldn't come up with a more vivid and visual film noir imagery, and it would then come around again, and the light would just fill my room again. And it went on for a good 25 minutes, and it was, of course, clear to me that the person they were looking for seemed to be in my building or right around my building. And that gave me an intimation of my own mortality. And that's what this poem is about. Poem noir. Light breaks across my window with that sound we call chop, chop, then circles back. It's keeping the place under wraps, winding in a sticky thread, the bad and the good, seeing someone used a gun and a crime again, then ran home. And last night cries from the street, so I looked out, but it was empty. Hell, just beat down rain bunkers of concrete lodge like crude ships that sank, and the bulb-lit sign, goodwill. But whenever I've been mugged, it wasn't here. Near Fairfax once, the gun against my head made a tiny pricking sound, like a watch, or like a click inside a watch, that pin drop we can't hear between the tick and the talk. It burnt my imagination woke it up. But I've got stories worse than that. 2 assholes dragged me off the street like I'd have seen them coming right, but I was checking my makeup under a light. What went down? This rhymes was not a pretty sight. There's things I can't tell even in poetry. You understand that? Anyway, so what? A cool being sweeps into my room, then circles up. But I was born in 51, see, that far back. And still, no cops had to trace in dime store chalk the outline of my shape where I stopped, leaned forward, not because I'd spotted my name in cement, then knelt on one knee, not because I was searching for something I'd lost, then two, not because I was praying, then sat, not because I was suddenly tired of all this, then lay. When there's no comedy, when you take out the comedy, you get the unvarnished truth. And then I think I will close with a poem by Diane Blakely. In this literary journal here, Malpais Review, I published, I think, what may be the first definition of the poem noir. There have been some essays saying that people were writing poems noir, but they didn't specifically describe what a poem noir is. Now, poems can rhyme. They can still rhyme. You know, who knows? They can still rhyme. They can actually rhyme. In this case, in fact, you can even write a sestina. Who knows? Who knows what is? Who knows how many words get repeated over and over again in a sestina? Anybody know? No, Richard and Kim know, but how many? She's saying, Cece's saying, of course she knows. She is herself a poet. 6 words get repeated over and over again in 6 stanzas, and at the end, that you all have to develop all of them into a 3-line envoy. And so this is Diane Blakely's Duplex noir. She references Body Heat and some Humphrey Bogart. And at the beginning, in each one of these, this little anthology within this journal, I have a little definition at the top explaining why I'm counting this among the seminal important poems noir. And I say, and I'm interviewing myself, see? So it's like Suzanne Lummis asks Suzanne Lummis, and then Suzanne Lummis answers. So Suzanne Lummis asks, what might be the perfect traditional poetic form for noir? And Suzanne Lummis answers, probably the sestina with its sense of entrapment, the rotation of those 6 recurring words that bind you to a condition you cannot break free of. All right, Duplex noir. At dusk, stars fizzle in this landlocked sky, and TV screens turn blue like smoke rising from my neighbor's grill, smoke perfumed with meat and already spilled booze. They brought enough. Bourbon for backslapping men, gin and tonic for those first dates, white wine for moms who call their sitters every hour. You haven't called. My set darkens with Florida night sky. Hurt and Turner sweating over tonic slopped with rum, the tang of cut limes rising as they plot to kill her husband. Enough. I've seen Body Heat twice before, Maddie and Ned scheming to make Richard Crenna meet, dead, burned meat between drinks and fucks and calls dialed from pay phones. I've never had enough of Florida, seared breeze and mackerel skies at sundown, my sand-crusted knees rising from castles left to watery tectonics as my parents, gins lightly splashed with tonic, picked at olives, cheese, cold sliced meats, and sang my name, their slurred voices rising like the waves. Channel 8, Lauren Bacall in Martinique, monochromatic skies and rum runner Bogart, who's had enough of Vichy thugs, who's never been loved enough, as any dame can see. The movies are tonic, but addictive for little girls too shy to play with boys who cry into their meat at dinners years later when boys don't call. And when they do, when her father shouts, "Rise and shake her bedroom walls," the volume rises next door, where they've had more than enough, the married and the single both. One call, that's all it would take. And what's more tonic than flesh on flesh? I could arrange to meet you anytime. Stars vibrate in the sky, now black among rising wires, trays of tonic and leftover booze. They've burned enough meat to call for pizza. Late news. No end of skies. Who wants to guess? Thank you. Anybody hear any of the repeating, recurring words? Anybody want to hazard a guess? What did you hear over and over again? I would take hands, or you can just scream it out. Tonic. Tonic is one. You got one? What? Meat. Tonic. Meat. Good. All right. Any other? What? I'll tell you the others. Give up? You give up? Okay. Sky, rising, meat, and one time she used Maddie. Remember the Turner character called she. Sometimes you can cheat and substitute a word that sounds like the word. Meat, enough, tonic, and call. All right, now you know what you heard. Sestina. Now I'm going to bring up Cece, and Cece is going to read. Cece is my longtime student, becoming a rather noted, well-known Los Angeles poet and woman around town, and Boulevard Dieu or something. And she is going to be in the forthcoming Pacific Coast Poetry Series anthology of Los Angeles poets that I'm editing, and we'll have about 90 of the best-known poets of the city and the surrounding region. So, Cece.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Richard and Kim, for hosting. This is Noir Salon in April, which is Poetry Month. So, because it's Poetry Month and because it's Noir, I thought I would read something from Raymond Chandler through Philip Marlowe on Marlowe's opinion of poetry on some level. He's talking to a chauffeur. I grow old, I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. What does that mean, Mr. Marlowe? Not a bloody thing, it just sounds good. He smiled. That's from the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. Here's another one. In the room, the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. Does that suggest anything to you, sir? Yeah, it suggests to me that the guy didn't know very much about women. And that's from The Long Goodbye. Raymond Chandler thinks so. Okay, I'm going to read, the first one I will read is titled The Automat. And it was inspired by a still from George Sherman's The Sleeping City, which was filmed in 1950. I also am happy to say that I actually ate in the Automat. This was filmed in I think the Times Square Automat in New York. Because I was very young at the time. The Automat. She steps out of the rain into the autumn mat, spigots a cup of coffee, angles her way to the table with the stained glass window, kicks off her 4-inch heels and stuffs them with wads of paper napkin. Then, no sooner does she pull out Camus the Stranger, in strides Richard Conti, all business in a suit. Well, she thinks, tonight the mascara may not be wasted. His eyes pick over the glossy cherry tables, all empty, so he swaggers over to hers. I'm looking for a driver, he says. Know any? I know of lots of people, she says, but maybe I'm what you need. His chin points to her open pages. You got something stronger than a library card? Sure, she says. I've got what it takes to drive. What's it pay? That, he says, depends on you. She loops her red lacquered toes over the rung of the chair next to her and pushes. As he slides into the seat, she wonders, how does one go about getting a library card? And sometimes in the noir poem, as per Suzanne Lummis, the crime hasn't happened, the situation that's going to throw people into a sort of series of destructive behaviors hasn't begun yet. So sometimes we're one step ahead of it. And this is called Trouble Down the Road. At the flat top grill, he was all business, flung raw eggs dead center into the corned beef hash like a strapping southpaw. In the alley with me, he was all ideas. Said he'd be leaving soon, had a shot back east, a tryout for the big leagues. Said his sister would loan him a Buick convertible, and he'd fill it with malt beer and tuna. All he needed was a woman to hold his cat while he drove. I like animals, I told him. And then I dropped my cigarette into the dusty clay, ground it out slow, felt the road under my foot. Thank you. My last poem. There is a debate going on, raging maybe, but going on in noir realms about what defines a film or a work of literature as noir. There seems to be many characteristics that, if they're included, give you confidence to say, well, that's a noir piece. And when we talk about what noir poetry is, there's a lot of wonderful noir-inspired poetry. So it's not that there's not a lot of great, noirish material out there. It's just that what makes something precisely noir is a little bit debatable. So this poem I wrote to help identify some of the elements that, if you see them in a work, you might feel, okay, that qualifies as noir. Now, there's many of them. You don't need all of them, and maybe one or two wouldn't be enough. It's kind of a critical mass situation. If you see enough of these, you can say it's noir. And coincidentally, the title is It's Noir. And there's an epigram. For some people, it's hard knowing what's noir and what's not. Max Bloom. And it's dedicated to Max Bloom, who knows. If there's a hitchhiker, border crossing, or sudden change of plans, If someone's named Vera, the Wall, or Lola Molina, if there's a knife fight, gunfight, or bare-knuckle justice, if a guy lights a match with his thumb, if someone's after payback, a payroll, or the lay of a lifetime, if the dead are buying land out in the valley, if there's a car, a cliff, and a claims adjuster, if a wife buys a black veil before she needs a black veil, if it's night, if it's raining, if the music's complicit, the drugs are illicit, the whole setup suspicious, if the guy you're rooting for winds up hugging a manhole cover, if even the moon ends up in the gutter, and if nobody ever had a chance to begin with, it's noir.
Yes, I was just saying that.
And Cece wrote all those poems in my class, my UCL extension class called Poetry Goes to the Movies, the poem Noir, which must be almost, you know, I think it's almost the only one in the country, because several years back, I got an email from, it was one of the Ivy League universities, Yale or Harvard, or it was Cornell or something, and the professor was saying, I'm evolving a class in the poem noir, and I noticed you're the only one who's teaching that. How do you do it? Can I see your curriculum? And so I sent him my curriculum, so I guess maybe it's useful to him. But Dale, Raoul, who is he? I scared the Jesus out of you just now. I hollered, I always holler at people. Who here has seen, anybody seen True Blood? Mary from True Blood, yeah. And then you were in the Dome, and many things. She's been in all the good things on television. And even if it's not good, she's always good in it. I've slipped her under the table a few poems noir to read. You're going to do one of mine, aren't you? That'll be interesting. And then we're going to come up and do a little scene together.
After yours, do you want to introduce them from the book?
Yeah, when you call me up whenever you want me.
Can we, let's perfect.
How's that sound? Yes, this is a poem called Femme Fatale that Suzanne Lummis wrote, and it's pretty cool. It's a crime story she's in. Betrayal and larceny. Few clues. Someone stole what she lived for, made off like a thief in the night or high noon. What shall she do? This, slide a heel on each foot and set out, snapping at each step. The man she loves smiles from the drugstore's rack of magazines, just in. Looks like he's wrapped his movie, dropped his wife on a Frisian island, and is flying his girlfriend to Saint-Tropez. The men who love her finger coins in the stale linings of their front pockets and whimper, "What's your name?" The job she wanted went to the man who tells the truth from one side of his mouth, lies from the other, a bilingual. The job she got lets her answer the questioning phone all day. Her disappointment has appetite, gravity. Fall in, you'll be crunched and stretched thin as fettuccine. Watch out for her, this woman. There is more than one. That woman with you, for instance, checking herself in the mirror to see where she stands. She's innocent so far, but someone will disappoint her. even now, you're beginning to. Even now, you're in danger. Suzanne, do you want to bring me the book? Yes, but are you going to do the keys piece?
Oh, you know that piece, right, of course, I'm sorry.
I don't have to.
Good. Oh, and I'm going to come up and I'm going to talk about Roman keys for a moment. All right, so in this literary journal,
where I talk about film noir, I decided that the seminal poem noir of the 20th century, written right around the middle of the 20th century, was a poem by Weldon Keys. Weldon Keys was a kind of genius living in San Francisco just before the Beats emerged. In fact, they emerged right a few months after he disappeared, because indeed he did disappear. He was an experimental filmmaker, an artist, an intellectual, a critic, a screenplay writer, a painter, and what he is remembered for is his poetry, which was so far ahead of its time. And he wrote, it was also depressive. So he wrote a poem called Crime Club, which is what Dale's going to read, one of my favorite poems. And his last that was ever seen of him, his car was found right near the Golden Gate Bridge with keys in the ignition, and he was never seen again. And he told a few friends that he was going to disappear to Mexico, change his name, and never come back, and so on, but change his identity. We think probably he went over that bridge. There's quite a few people who went over that bridge. They keep a careful count, the highway patrol does, but they don't know how many people went over and were never seen. And so therefore, he really lived the more life. And this poem would have been written right around 1950, probably, and he disappeared in 55. And then we will do something together, right?
okay, I'll hang around here. I'll sit down right here. Hang out.
Crime Club. No butler, no second maid, no blood upon the stair, no eccentric aunt, no gardener, no family friend smiling among the bric-a-brac and murder. Only a suburban house with the front door open, and a dog barking at a squirrel, and cars passing. The corpse quite dead, the wife in Florida. Consider the clues. The potato masher in a vase, the torn photograph of a Wesleyan basketball team, scattered with check stubs in the hall, the unsent fan letter to Shirley Temple, the Hoover button on the lapel of the deceased, the note, "To be killed this way is quite all right with me." Small wonder that the case remains unsolved, or that the sleuth, LaRue, is now incurably insane, and sits alone in a white room in a white gown, screaming that all the world is mad, that clues lead nowhere, or to walls so high their tops cannot be seen, screaming all day of war, screaming that nothing can be solved.
Again, you get that sense that the poem noir starts with one little particular situation, a particular murder, and then has something larger to say about the condition of the world. Now, who here likes Raymond Chandler? Yay, everybody loves Raymond Chandler. He's our boy. He's one of the best writers ever to emerge from Los Angeles. And something that he did that was so brilliant, especially in Farewell, My Lovely, he does it just to the max. He studied design and architectural styles, very carefully, and interior design, so that he could describe houses and the facades of houses and the interiors. And he would often, when he was really on his game, he would describe a house a certain way, and then the person who stepped out of that house was exactly like the house they were living in. In fact, they were complete, like the embodiment, the personification of the house they were living in. And the room that they were in was a complete personification of the psyche of the person. And he does it here so well. Marlowe, Philip Marlowe, the great detective, is interviewing, looking for, he needs to find a woman named Velma, not for the reasons that he tells Mrs. Jessie Florian, but for other reasons he needs to find a woman named Velma. I guess that's all you need to know. No, let's go over here. Let's try. Can you hear me? Can you hear my voice at all? You want to move forward? Okay, so let's go. Okay, so we'll sort of be here, but we won't too much worry about that. We'll just hope we can be heard. If all of a sudden you can't hear me, just wave and scream out and roll on the ground, do something to signal to me. All right, from Farewell My Lovely. 1644 West 54th Place was a dried out brown house with a dried out brown lawn in front of it. There was a large bare patch around one tough-looking palm tree. On the porch stood one lonely wooden rocker, and the afternoon breeze made the unpruned shoots of last year's poinsettias tap, tap against the cracked stucco wall. A line of stiff, yellowish, half-washed clothes jittered on a rusty wire in the side yard. I drove on a quarter block, parked my car across the street, and walked back. The bell didn't work, so I rapped on the wooden margin of the screen door. Slow steps shuffled, and the door opened, and I was looking into dimness at a blousy woman who was blowing her nose as she opened the door. Her face was gray and puffy. She had weedy hair of that vague color which is neither brown nor blonde, that hasn't enough life in it to be ginger and isn't clean enough to be gray. Her body was thick in a shapeless outing flannel bathrobe, many moons past color and design. It was just something around her body. Her toes were large and obvious in a pair of man's slippers of scruffed brown leather. Mrs. Florian? Mrs. Jessie Florian? The voice dragged itself out of her throat like a sick man getting out of bed.
Uh-huh.
You are the Mrs. Florian whose husband once ran a place of entertainment on Central Avenue, Mike Florian? She thumbed a wick of hair past her large ear. Her eyes glittered with surprise.
What? Well, my goodness sakes alive. Mike's been gone these 5 years. Who'd you say you were?
I'm a detective. I like a little information. She stared at me a long, dreary minute, then with effort she unlocked the door and turned away from me.
Well, come on in then. I ain't had time to get cleaned up yet. Cops, huh?
I stepped through the door and hooked the screen again. A large, handsome cabinet radio droned to the left of the door in the corner of the room. It was the only decent piece of furniture the place had. It looked brand new. Everything else was junk. Dirty, overstuffed pieces, a wooden rocker that matched the one on the porch, a square arch into the dining room with a stained table, finger marks all over the swing door to the kitchen beyond, a couple of frayed lamps with once gaudy shades that were now as gay as superannuated streetwalkers. The woman sat down in a rocker and flopped her slippers and looked at me. I looked at the radio and sat down on the end of the Davenport. She saw me looking at it. A bogus hardiness, as weak as a Chinaman's tea, moved into her face and voice.
That's all the company I got. Mike ain't done nothing new, has he? I don't get cops calling on me much.
Her titter contained a loose alcoholic overtone. I leaned back against something hard, felt for it, and brought up an empty quart gin bottle.
A joke, that was. I hope to Christ they got enough cheap blondes where he is. He never got enough of them here.
I was thinking more about a redhead.
Well, I guess he could use a few of them, too. I don't call to mind. Any special redhead?
Yes, a girl named Velma. I don't know what last name she used, except it wouldn't have been her real one. I'm trying to trace her for her folks. Your place on Central is a colored place now, although they haven't changed the name. And of course the people there, they've never heard of her. So I thought of you.
Well, folks are taking their time getting around to it, looking for her.
Oh, well, there's little money involved. Not much. I guess they have to get to her in order to touch it. Money sharpens the memory.
So does liquor. Kinda hot today, ain't it? You said you were a copper, though.
Cunning eyes, steady, attentive face. The feet in the man's slippers didn't move. I held up the dead soldier and shook it. Then I threw it to one side and reached back on my hip for the pint of Bond bourbon the Negro hotel clerk and I had barely tapped. I held it out on my knee. The woman's eyes became fixed in an incredulous stare. Then suspicion climbed all over her face like a kitten, but not so playfully.
You ain't no copper. No copper ever bought a drink of that stuff. What's the gag, mister?
She blew her nose again on one of the filthiest, dirtiest handkerchiefs I ever saw. Her eyes stayed on the bottle. Suspicion fought with thirst, and thirst was winning. It always does. This Velma was an entertainer, a singer. You wouldn't know her? I don't suppose you were there much.
Oh, man, that's liquor. I don't give a damn who you are. Just hold it careful, mister. This ain't no time to drop anything.
She got up and waddled out of the room and came back with 2 thick smeared glasses.
No fixins, just what you brought is all.
I poured her a slug that would have made me float over a wall. She reached for it hungrily and put it down her throat like an aspirin tablet and looked at the bottle. I poured her another and a smaller one for me. She took it over to her rocker. Her eyes had turned 2 shades browner already.
Man, this stuff dies painless with me. It never knows what hit it. Now, what was we talking about?
A red-haired girl named Velma who used to work at your place on Central Avenue.
Yeah. Who you say you was?
I took out a card and gave it to her. She read it with her tongue and lips, dropped it on a table beside her, and set her empty glass on it.
Oh, a private guy. You ain't said that, mister. But your liquor says you're an all right guy at that. Here's to crime. Cute little redhead. Yeah, I remember her song and dance. Nice legs, generous with them. She went off somewheres. How would I know what them tramps do?
Well, I didn't really think you would know, but it was natural for me to come and ask you, Mrs. Florian. You help yourself to the whiskey. I could run out for some more when we need it.
You ain't drinking.
I put my hand around my glass and swallowed what was in it slowly enough to make it seem like it was more than it was.
Where's her folks at?
What does that matter?
Okay. All cops is the same. Okay, handsome. A guy that buys me a drink is a pal.
She reached out for the bottle and set up number 4.
I should not have barter with you, but when I like a guy, the ceiling's the limit.
She was as cute as a wash tub.
Hold on to your chair and don't step on no snakes. I got an idea.
She got up out of the rocker, sneezed, almost lost the bathrobe, slapped it back against her stomach, and stared at me.
No peeking.
And then she went out of the room again, hitting the door frame with her shoulder.
Let's just say goodbye to everyone.
Okay.
Thank everyone for coming.
Thank you,
Poetry Noir
everybody,
reading.
for coming to the Poetry Noir reading. We've got a whole other section coming up, which I have heard, the word on the streets is this is going to be fascinating. Really good.
Okay,
So,
perfect.
all right.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Dale. Thank you. Where's Cece? Okay, Kim, come up here for a second. They just read from Raymond Chandler. You just published your book about Raymond Chandler, which is set at this intersection. So give us 30 seconds before we take a break.
Thank you. I know a few people here have read The Kept Girl. I've been hearing from readers. It's lovely. S14, it's on your press. We launched it in February, and the idea is to take a real crime of 20s LA, the sort of thing that inspired Chandler in his writing of all these wonderful Marlowe stories that helped to kickstart the film noir, and put Raymond Chandler himself as the detective. So he is the star, along with a cop who used to work down at 7th and Broadway, a guy named Tom James, a reformer and troublemaker, and of course a secretary, because Marlowe didn't work so much with secretaries, but Chandler always did. So if you're interested in The Kept Girl, come see me. We have some copies and some flyers about it, and it's available for sale.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's see. I have, is it at 1 o'clock? Yes, great. All right, 10 minutes. We'll come back at 10 after 1. Where's Nathan? Nathan, you're going to talk at 10 after 1. You're going to talk about the architecture of death. So thank you. Go get an espresso. And we'll see you back real soon. And Chris Nichols, I have something. I have the Camino Bowl magazine for you. Come get a flyer.